Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just go ahead and commence the meeting a couple of minutes early, which would be a record for us. I'd like to welcome everyone here this afternoon, particular welcome to Chief Constable and the senior team. Special welcome to Temporary Assistant Chief Constable Chris Noble, the first day here in your new role. And I'd also like to welcome Barney McGahan to my right, who's joined the board this week as the interim Chief Executive. We have a slightly different format to this session today. We will be dedicating the first 15 minutes to questions on the Chief Constable's monthly report, and then we will be using the remaining time for a presentation on the policing plan for 2015-16. And the lady colleagues there for you. I'm delighted that the Justice Minister is also with us today, as indeed are many of the stakeholders who engaged with us in the development of the plan. Also, if you think there's an awful lot of police officers here, you're right, because we are delighted to welcome the new district commanders this afternoon, and these are the people who have responsibility for delivering in the community through the local plans and working with the local police community safety partnerships. We do have some questions in this first part of the meeting, but first I'd like to extend some congratulations, and that's to all of the officers involved in the major drug seizure last week. We hope to be seeing more of this work with the NCA in the time ahead, and indeed as a board we will be meeting with the Director General of the NCA to discuss accountability and operating arrangements here, and we'll be doing that later this month. Of particular concern over the last week is the spate of paramilitary attacks, and we have set a new target around that in the policing plan, which we will come to later. But we will move on now, and Chief, I invite you, if you have any brief introductory remarks, to give them to us on your report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as you're aware, the monthly report has been delivered to members, and I'm happy to take questions on that in due course. But a few headlines or topical issues that I think it's worth commenting on. Today is the 4th anniversary of the murder of our colleague, Constable Ronan Kerr. At this time, my thoughts and the thoughts of the police service of Northern Ireland are with Ronan's family. Even 4 years on, it is difficult to imagine the pain they feel at the loss of Ronan. Indeed, given our painful history, I know there are many other police families and other families who continue to grieve and feel that pain today. We knew from the outset that the investigation into Ronan's murder was going to be a long-term inquiry which incorporates several linked incidents, including attempts to murder other police officers, a bomb attack, arms finds and armed robberies. It has proven to be an extremely large investigation, but one which still has the potential to be concluded by charging the suspects. A significant amount of progress has been made, but the key to putting people before the courts charged with Ronan's murder lies with the local communities in Omagh and East Tyrone. So I would appeal to anyone who knows who was involved in the events and the arrangements surrounding Ronan's murder to come forward. People who try to justify the murder of a police officer by speaking of targeting the police uniform rather than the individual, well, it's not possible, as we know, to separate the two. Ronan was a son and a brother, as well as a police officer. Ronan's murder served nothing other than to bring pain and needless cruelty to his family. Only with the community support can we continue to protect the community, and that's why Detective Chief Inspector Una Jennings is making a very specific appeal for information on this, the 4th anniversary of Ronan's murder. Community support and information is also critical in responding to the horror of paramilitary attacks that the Chair has referred to. There have been 12 such attacks since we last met with the policing board. That is 5 shootings and 7 assaults. One attack is one too many. In the past, victims have been as young as 14, so this is child abuse. In some attacks, children have witnessed their parents being savagely beaten or shot. These attacks are an appalling feature of our society. I'm well aware that our clearance, our detection rate for these heinous crimes is nowhere near good enough. It is an issue I take extremely seriously. These crimes are notoriously challenging to investigate, but we will not be deterred in our efforts. All attacks are being fully investigated, Chair. Our Serious Crime Branch is providing specialist support to the investigations so that we can be confident, and you can be confident, that the investigations are being carried out to the highest possible standards. You have my commitment that we will continue to review and challenge ourselves around how we respond to and investigate paramilitary style attacks. I also fully expect the board will hold me to account on this issue. Paramilitary attacks have been a feature of our society throughout Northern Ireland's troubled history. To truly break this cycle, we need the community's help and support. We need something called evidence. The community can choose to reject this crime by providing information and making statements of evidence. I understand that some people in the community may be scared of speaking to the police for fear of reprisal, but it is possible to provide information confidentially. Communities should not be subjected to fear and intimidation. Some people within communities tolerate these attacks as a means of dealing with local antisocial behaviour and other criminality. These brutal attacks represent no form of justice. My officers will prevent and detect crime in a human rights-based approach, and we are incredibly successful in doing so when we have the support of the community. We need community support to tackle this issue of paramilitary style attacks. I recognise that as a police service we have to continue our efforts to secure and build trust and support for the police within our most vulnerable communities. We are up to that continuing challenge. Over the next 12 months, I would be keen that we continue a public discussion on the issue of paramilitary style attacks within the board, but particularly with PCSPs and with local communities. That's where the answers lie, that's where the evidence lies. The cowards who carry out these attacks depend on darkness and silence in the community. We need to work together to have a public conversation that builds confidence and breaks the silence. This is a public conversation that I know the district commanders who are with us here today will want to be part of in the months ahead. The new 11 district policing model, which became operational yesterday, reflects our commitment to local service delivery, local accountability and local partnership working. At a time of huge financial challenge, we have aligned our district command structure to be coterminous with the new local council arrangements. That's to facilitate the most effective possible structures for local partnership working. In particular, the advent of community planning presents real opportunities for grounding partnership working in a way that will improve the well-being of our local communities and help to keep people safe. Also working hard to keep people safe are not just the district commanders with us here today, but various parts of the organisation, including Organised Crime Branch. PSNI, as you've mentioned, Chair, working with the National Crime Agency and other law enforcement agencies, are leading an investigation into the importation and distribution of cannabis throughout Northern Ireland. To date on that operation, 10 people have been arrested across Northern Ireland and England. 5 men have so far appeared in court on a series of drug trafficking and money laundering charges. £1 million worth of cannabis has been seized in the last week, and this is in addition to the 1.2 million worth of skunk cannabis seized by police in recent months. In fact, separate from that operation, as we speak, another organised crime operation is ongoing, and just over the last 12 hours or so we've seized a further £90,000 worth of cocaine, as well as firearms and ammunition, and 2 arrests have been made at this stage. This is just a couple of examples of the huge number of investigations that we have been running against organised crime. I can speak publicly about these investigations because they've now reached a point of executive action, and it is now therefore in the public domain. But there are many, many more long-running, complex investigations ongoing that have not yet reached that point. It is critically important that the community and the policing board understand that keeping people safe is not just about the policing that you can see. So much of what we do is necessarily invisible. but it is no less important in protecting people, preventing harm and bringing offenders to justice. The huge financial challenges that we face have been an issue, and we have discussed them probably at every board since I have been appointed as Chief Constable. I therefore think it is important to provide a moment's clarity on the recent media attention about police services projected underspend. As I indicated to the board in my March report, we are expecting an underspend at the end of this financial year. We currently estimate that to be in the region of £14 million. And over the last year, the significant financial volatility has made financial planning extraordinarily difficult. In October 2014, we were notified of a £51.4 million in-year cut. We immediately instigated a series of radical cost-cutting exercises, including bringing an end to our agency staff contract. A number of weeks later, we were notified of an unexpected and an additional £13 million back to the police budget, bringing the required in-year reductions to £38.4 million. And while I do remain very grateful to the executive for showing support to policing during this time, it is a fact that many of the cost-cutting decisions had already been taken. They were either impossible or it was illogical to reverse, particularly so given the financial picture for 2015-16 that we have now just moved into. Despite falling police numbers, it was not possible to invest the underspend in recruiting police officers this year because this funding is simply not there in future years to continue to meet the ongoing salary costs. We cannot employ police officers for 4 or 5 months at a time. We employ them for 35 years. Following our prudent financial management, it would have been my preference to invest this £14 million underspend in our long-term effectiveness and efficiency programme by carrying it over as part of a strategic reserve for the challenging years ahead. However, that's not possible within the current local funding arrangements. As I have outlined in my report to the board, the years ahead continue to look incredibly challenging. There is no doubt that we will have to prioritise our services to meet the needs of the most vulnerable in our community and to ensure that we tackle the most serious threat, harm and risk in our society. And we will speak more of this in a few minutes with the launch of the policing plan. Finally, before I finish, thank you to ACC Mark Hamilton, who has kindly moved across to lead the Human Resources portfolio on a temporary basis upon the retirement of Alistair Finlay last month, and also echo the Chair's words of welcome to Temporary Assistant Chief Constable Chris Noble, who joins the executive team and taking over responsibility for Service Improvement Department. Chair, I know there's a number of questions from the board before we move to discussing the policing plan, so I'll conclude my remarks at that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Constable. We'll probably just take about 5 minutes on the questions because many of the issues which you raised in your report are actually scheduled to be asked during the policing plan discussion.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, we'll take this part just to ask 2 or 3 of the questions which have come up around legacy issues, and then we'll move to the policing plan. So we'll start off with Pat Sheehan.
Chief Constable, I asked a question in regard to the hooded men, and the question was, have the PSNI in your possession tapes or records of those tapes of the interrogations of the hooded men? The response is somewhat confusion. I think you've conflated 2 issues, the issue of the hooded men and a separate issue of internment. But in any event, the answer isn't clear, but the final line in your answer says, however, it is not possible to disclose any such information in response to your request. And the answer I simply wanted was to know whether or not you had that information. I didn't particularly want to get it myself. I'm just wondering, could you give us some clarity around that issue?
Answer as straightforward as I can, Pat. We weren't trying to be confused in the answer. We just don't know because we haven't went through the search procedures yet that we're looking for. There are some ongoing judicial procedures you'll be aware of, and some of them related So the short answer is, we don't know what we have. We think a lot of those cases involve the military, and therefore we wouldn't have possession or retain possession of them anyway. But when a court requires us to go looking for the material, the court will get whatever it is we have.
And I understand that, but I just want to know, is there any reason, legal or otherwise, why the board couldn't be informed if you have or haven't got that particular information?
No, there's none, but the short answer is we simply don't know at this stage because we haven't looked at it in detail.
Okay, thanks for that. And sorry, just go ahead with that. Another question in regard to disclosure to the coroner's inquest court. I was actually present at an inquest hearing earlier on in the year when counsel for PSNI explained that part of the delay in disclosure was because the contract for agency workers had come to an end on the 31st of December 2014, and there was a requirement to recruit new members and then train them up, and it was possible that the whole process would be held up until after Easter. But after looking at the answers to the question that I asked, or Jerry Kelly asked, I see that all the new recruits and those who had been there beforehand only had to undergo 2 days training in systems and disclosure and redaction. Just when we see that, you know, the suspicion is going to be there that the excuses or reasons that were given to the coroner for delays are simply just another way of slowing down the disclosure process. So I'm wondering, could you comment on that?
Well, 2 days, as I understand it, for familiarisation into the PSNI and into the systems and so on. The quality of people that we have recruited into those posts is of a very high standard, academically and practical experience, many of them qualified lawyers, and therefore the calibre of what we have recruited means that they're coming with the necessary skills. That was the whole point of the selection process. There is also a need for people to learn this business on the job, because this is highly complex. We are talking about right across the stretch of all of these inquests and through the period of the Troubles, millions of documents, hundreds of thousands of exhibits and all the rest of it, all of which need to be gone through and decisions made about disclosure and redaction, proposed redactions for the coroner and so on. So we've trained the people on the basics that they need to know so they can navigate their way around the system and around the organisation. But a lot of this needs to be learning on the job, and what we have done is bring in very bright, good people, already highly qualified in law and to an appropriate standard, and we're doing our best. But what we have is a mountain of material that isn't particularly very well searchable. There is an issue that the board may wish to consider around advocating for some investment around back record conversion of material related to all of these legacy issues so that we can become more efficient at that. But the way it is, we're not going to artificially create training programs to make it look impressive. What we have done is set a very high standard, essential and desirable criteria. We get the right people into the organisation. We believe we've done that. They're very impressive people. And we have given them enough training so that they can then go and learn on the job, and that's the process that we're going through.
I suppose given what you've said about the high calibre of people that you've recruited, can we expect the speeding up of the disclosure process then?
Well, people are one of the inputs into the whole process. I've said to you that part of the problem is the sheer volume of material. We have millions of documents, not just intelligence documents, but evidential documents, records of meetings, of operations, and all the rest of it, in storage, some of it hard copy, some of it on microfiche, 3 legacy IT systems that don't necessarily talk to each other, and all of those need to be interrogated every time a request is made for these inquests that open up. So I don't want to give promises about speeding up just simply on the basis of the calibre of the individuals that we've now employed. There are bigger, more systemic problems that none of the transformation of policing arrangements, none of the pattern report, none of the numbers and the Good Friday Agreement didn't deal with any of this, and we're at a place now where we're trying to find a way through that. And the first piece of sensible work that we need to do, regardless of who owns the material in the future or who has access to it in the future, is a back record conversion to all of these millions of documents so that they're searchable, accessible and workable. So no matter what the calibre of the people is, if we don't have the technology and the systems in place behind it to allow them to access the material, then it's going to continue to be challenging.
Thank you. Jonathan Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Chief, keeping on this theme of legacy, it wasn't yourself, but your predecessor had made a commitment to the board to actually share with the board all of the information he had on the OTR process after the two investigations were complete. Now that they are complete, are we likely to receive that information, or is there something which will override that?
Well, I've said since I've become Chief Constable that my starting position will be to share material with the board, and with that comes responsibility for how the board handles it. You refer to them as investigations. I think you're referring to the inquiry led by Justice Hallett and then the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee, and it is true to say that both of those inquiries have now reported, but coming out of that, both inquiries have made recommendations that we work through those people who received letters and seek to check and investigate whether or not that could lead to future challenges around abusive process applications, as happened in the Downey case. So we're working through all of that. I can't say to you without any reservation that you can have the material. First of all, a lot of it is operational, personal material. I'm happy for the board to be presented with the evidence that we give to the inquiries, unless it pertains to individuals or investigations that could actually jeopardise or undermine criminal justice processes in the future. But the starting point will be we will share with you what we can, and where we can't share, we'll explain why.
Thanks, Chief, and thank you for that answer. With regard to that, I do welcome the fact that there now does seem to be evidence in some of those cases that may well lead to prosecutions. But what I will say is, and I think as a board we will demand an answer on this, why was the original process not robust enough to highlight those same evidence bases that could lead to a conviction? And hopefully we will get answers to that.
Sorry, you asked me to answer that now, or yeah? Well, the answers to all of those questions are contained within the report produced by Justice Hallett. We were clearly one of the cogs in the machinery that led ultimately to the issue of these letters. We didn't know that letters were being issued. We were answering questions that were asked of us, and that was done. The Northern Ireland Affairs Committee said in good faith. There's a difference between in good faith and being accurate. There clearly were inaccuracies. Mr. Justice Sweeney described the inaccuracy in the Downey case as a catastrophic failure on our part. Matt Baggett and I have apologised to the families of the Hyde Park bomb victims for that catastrophic mistake. So, you know, that is probably the headline point about what went wrong. That's well rehearsed publicly, and it's on the record in the Hallett report and referenced in the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee report. But other than going through case by case detail and finding individual errors, I'm not sure that this is the forum to do that, and nor would I want to jeopardise or undermine any potential future proceedings against any individuals.
And with a final legacy question from Rose Kelly.
Thank you, Chair, and the two are interlinked. Can I ask the Chief Constable in relation to the time frame for the assisting offender case, and could perhaps explain some of the delays in bringing that to court, and also whether or not there have been any further actions taken by the PSNI in relation to the recommendations of the independent review panel regarding resources for Operation Stafford?
Which assisting offender case are you asking about?
Haggerty.
Sorry?
The Haggerty case?
Well, the Haggerty case is, proceedings have commenced. There's prosecutorial decisions that need to be taken. There's a trial pending, and whilst there is a briefing that we could rightly give our accountability body, the board, I prefer to do that in private session. I wouldn't be wanting to make any public comment about this that could be used to jeopardise what has already been a difficult and complex process. So I accept that there is public concern around the length of time. I'm also confident that we have acted with integrity and professionalism through the assisting offender process, but I don't want to say or do anything that could jeopardise potential future court proceedings. On the Stafford resourcing issue, forgive me if I'm making the wrong assumption, but does this refer to us removing the 4 personnel from the case that was referred to in the television programme? Well, the answer to that is very simple. We did remove 4 people who probably had the best and most intimate knowledge of that case. Those 4 people were engaged as temporary workers. The temporary worker contract ended on the 31st of December 2014. Primarily due to financial reasons. The use of agency staff was always a highly controversial issue in which this board challenged me, this team and our predecessors on the use of agency workers, and in particular former police officers who had returned to the organisation as agency workers. We constantly made the point that to try to keep the business running, that these people were necessary, that they came with a skill set, that they were cheap. And the business case always contained the line, and this is what made it compelling for us, that due to financial uncertainty going into the future, temporary workers was a more sensible option in that, number 1, it was cheaper, and number 2, it had flexibility, that if and when the money ran out, they were a liability, a financial liability that is, that we could dispense with. And that's what happened. The money ran out and they had to go. Now, we haven't just left that as a vacuum. We have recruited in preparation for agency workers going, and a lot of them were engaged in legacy work. And also with the collapse of the historical inquiries team, we have created the new legacy investigations branch. I told the board in the summer when we were doing that we would anticipate by this point to have 70 staff working full-time on legacy issues, both review and investigations work. And we've done that. So today there are just over 70 people who have been deployed to that team. And some of those people are doing the work that the 4 agency workers that we had to let go were previously doing. So it's not as if the investigation has stopped. Would it have been more comfortable and easier to keep the temporary workers? Of course it would, but it's a highly controversial method of filling the gap, and actually the controversy that we discussed with the board over many months or years didn't go away, and we kept doing it, and actually it went away when the money ran out, which ironically was always part of the business case, that this gave us financial flexibility in terms of workforce planning. So it's as straightforward as that, and I'd like to reassure you that there was no other motivation or conspiracy behind the removal of those 4 people. We simply no longer have a contract to engage them because we stopped the temporary worker contract.
Chair, can I just follow up by asking, in relation to workforce management, if you like, how do you ensure that there is a handover of case of that information which you have said that those officers had? And then if I can ask us, given the legislative requirements that are needed to establish the Historical Investigations Unit, do you have other concerns in relation to the investigative capacity of people out there who will be able to fill such posts when HIU is established?
Well, the temporary worker contract didn't end overnight. We made the decision in October, and the contract ended at the end of December, so there was a handover. People across all of the cases, there was a management plan led by Brian Hanna, who was the head of Legacy Investigations Branch and head of HET in its final months. There was a management plan for the transitional arrangements, for the download of information, and a lot of this stuff happens in a fairly standardised way. We have in major crime investigations things called current situation reports, which is all part of the quality assurance and the review mechanism. Those happen routinely anyway, so it wasn't a case of 4 people went out the door and then we started scratching our head to try to find 4 people to replace them. There was an impact assessment done, and there was a transition plan put in place to minimise the effect. But of course, the head knowledge that these people have lived and breathed over a number of years has gone, and I'm not going to pretend that we have can operate at the same speed or the same knowledge. There is memory that has left the organisation on the 31st of December, but that is a consequence of us ending the temporary workers contract. The second part of your question regarding the staffing of the Historical Investigations Unit, we as a team fully support the Stormont Place Agreement, and including the Historical Investigations Unit. We wanted to work. We realised that it's a political initiative and all of that, and we don't want to interfere in that respect. But we are ready and available and willing to assist the government departments, the politicians, in what that might look and feel like. But it's matters to wait until we're invited. I do have a concern about investigative capacity within this jurisdiction, and where on earth the Historical Investigations Unit is going to get those investigators from who have currency and have accreditation if they're not going to consider some sort of secondment basis in the other agencies who do this work. Probably in this jurisdiction, the police service, or if that's not palatable for some political reason, then across into the Ombudsman's office. There seems to be something that, as the legislation is getting created and the details are getting finalised, I would have thought it would make sense so that the Historical Investigations Unit could hit the ground running to build the capacity in the meantime, rather than waiting potentially 2 years and then working out what the workforce plan is going to be. But in one sense, that's a responsibility for other people. You've asked for my view and I've given it to you, but it's not my responsibility, and there's a good argument to keep at arm's length from the police service. We'll be happy to get on with policing the present and the future once this responsibility is taken from us.
Do you want to ask something?
Without wanting to rehash the whole issue of temporary workers again, Chief, but would it not be fair to say, though, that the consequences of what has happened, which is the loss, you rightly say, of experience in that, is partly down to a lack of perhaps good succession planning, workforce planning over a long period of time. While people accept that skills and knowledge, people have those, there is the issue, of course, that people were actually on temporary contracts for 5-6 years, which actually defeats the purpose of what a temporary contract is. So without wanting to rehash that whole issue, I think it is, though, important for the PSNI to acknowledge that how we arrived at that situation of people on temporary contracts holding such intelligence and knowledge and expertise is also down to not doing proper workforce planning and modelling over a long period of time, and hopefully that we will never return to that again, and we can train people into roles that are deemed to be absolutely necessary, which you've just said, but are recruited on a permanent basis.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I'm going to move now to the policing plan for 2015. As I said earlier today, we're formally launching the plan, and we're going to take some time to go through some of the targets and the measures set, indeed some in conjunction with some of our stakeholders who are present. And we'd like Chief Constable to provide you with the opportunity to respond in more detail on the service delivery plans for the year ahead, and what can be expected from the public, and indeed in the light of district restructuring which took effect yesterday. The plan is the board's key statutory document for oversight of police performance, and has been developed through a focused consultation exercise, including engagement with policing and community safety partnerships, the joint board PSNI strategic consultation group, and the board's youth advisory panel, a review of police performance to date against the outcomes and associated performance measures within the 2014-17 plan, and what I'll describe as some pretty robust negotiations with you, Chief Constable, and your team. So that's how we've arrived at the plan that we have. The aim of the plan is to keep people safe through the prevention of crime, protection of people and communities, and detecting those who commit to crime and making sure that we can bring them to justice. To acknowledge the importance of policing with the community, the plan has been revised to reflect a strengthened emphasis on quality of service, partnership working, and a focus on policing priorities. In developing and setting this year's targets, the Board has focused its attention on setting measures that specify the level of improvement to be achieved. The plan comprises 11 outcomes with associated performance indicators and a further 49 associated performance measures. There has been a significant increase in the number of performance measures which are expressed in quantitative terms in the plan, actually 32 compared with 13 in the previous year. While this range of measures, or these ranges of measures, have been put in place and are stretching, the Board believes that they are achievable despite ongoing pressures on the budget. The plan also includes a number of measures to improve the efficiency of the organisation through a range of continuous improvement projects. Improving the service to those who are vulnerable is a key focus in the plan, with new measures being introduced around reducing the risk to vulnerable missing persons, including young people and looked after children, increasing the outcome rate for domestic burglary, where older people are the victims, reducing the number of crimes occurring in rural areas, and reductions in crimes with a domestic motivation. Last week's Tackling Hate Crime conference highlighted some of the challenges we as a society need to face. And whilst reducing hate crime requires wider society to play their part, police have a key job to do in making sure those who commit these offences are brought to justice. So there are a number of targets set around reducing hate crime. Last year recorded the highest number of road deaths for some time, and the advertising awareness messages on road safety just don't seem to be getting through to some people. We hope that the new Radar Life Skills Centre opening later this year will assist in early years education. But measures around the enforcement of contributory factors to road traffic collisions have been prioritised by the Board for the PSNI. Tackling drug driving, tackling speeding, mobile phone use, non-wearing of seatbelts, and driving without insurance. As a Board, we welcome the changes to frontline policing, which will see the police districts restructuring to align with these new council areas. And as I said previously, we're delighted that we have a number of the local commanders with us today. We believe that this change brings opportunity, and the establishment of new PCSPs as part of the local government reforms presents a real opportunity to do things differently. The PCSPs have been integral in shaping this plan, and through their consultation with communities and work with the PSNI, other statutory bodies and voluntary agencies, they are in an ideal position to really make an impact on how policing and community safety is delivered locally within the new community planning framework. We are, of course, mindful of the security threat which policing operates under, and we recognise the additional demands on the budget through dealing with the legacy issues. However, we are determined that such pressures will not affect frontline policing and policing with the community. At a time of reduced funding, it is also important that the Board makes sure that the resources available to the PSNI are used effectively and efficiently. And there are organisational targets around reducing sickness, developing measures to improve representation, and reducing allegations of incivility, failure in duty, and oppressive behaviour. There are also 3 key recommendations to address in the recently published HMIC report on responding to austerity. And of course, this plan also sets out the continuous improvement arrangements for PSNI in the year ahead. Finally, tackling organised crime in all its forms, including the growing area of cybercrime, remains a focus. With full NCA powers extended from June, we will also expect to see the tangible benefits for policing here in terms of gaps previously highlighted. The Board will be closely monitoring performance against the plan in the year ahead, and at all times making sure that the delivery of the best possible policing service for Northern Ireland becomes reality for people. There certainly is a lot in the plan for policing, indeed an awful lot for a plan which is 1 year. But I now invite you, Chief Constable, to outline your plans around the delivery and comments on the measures set.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, Minister. and members of the public, it is good to have the opportunity to take a few minutes to make some comments as we launch this latest policing plan. This plan is significant to me because it's my first one as Chief Constable, and the plan, as you have said, Chair, has been a joint enterprise in terms of its development, and it represents the shared vision of PSNI and the Policing Board as we move forward, clearly evidenced by the joint purpose statement right on the front page of the plan of keeping people safe. This plan is of itself, I think, evidence of collaborative decision making, showing collaborative decision making in action. And as you said, with 11 outcomes, 49 associated performance measures, 32 of which are numeric targets, this plan sets a high bar for policing. And as the Chair of the Board has pointed out, this is particularly challenging given the reduced resources that faces the police service. The plan also reflects that this is a time of significant change in policing. There is no doubt that the financial challenges will mean more difficult decisions as we are increasingly forced to prioritise resources. Against the backdrop of an extremely challenging public finance environment, this plan will ensure the most effective and efficient use of resources, officers, staff, money that will respond to threat, risk and harm in our communities. In particular, I too welcome the plan's focus on vulnerability and appreciate the Board's support in ensuring that our reducing resources will be focused to protect the most vulnerable in our society. Policing in Northern Ireland is subject to scrutiny from many quarters, and I welcome the oversight of the Policing Board and others in monitoring and holding us to account for progress. Accountability is an essential component in the delivery of efficient and effective policing, as well as building confidence in our police service. As Chief Constable, the Board will hold me to account against delivery of this plan. Our performance is a critical issue for me as Chief Constable, for you as board members, and indeed for the communities that we serve. The PSNI's newly developed corporate performance framework that the Deputy Chief Constable and ICC Chris Noble have led on will have a key focus on delivering the policing plan, evaluating the policing with the community ethos, and driving and refining the activities which help to keep people safe. That's what we're about. As police officers, we have a duty to protect life, to preserve order, to prevent crime, secure justice. And the plan identifies the agreed priorities for how we will achieve this in the coming year. As previous years have demonstrated, the demands upon policing are dynamic, changing and often unpredictable, requiring us to maintain the flexibility to divert resources to different priorities, which may not actually sit within the plan. Short-term crises impact upon performance, and on those occasions success can be judged by keeping people safe and protecting life rather than necessarily delivering against the specifics of the plan. However, it is important to acknowledge the unique and difficult context in which these policing plan targets are set. I support the targets, I think it's healthy for policing, but there is a difficult context in which the policing plan is going to be delivered. As we spoke of earlier, for example, today is the anniversary of the murder of Constable Ronan Kerr. A small but dangerous group of violent dissident Republicans continue to plan attacks on police and pose a threat to the safety and well-being of all of our communities. There is no doubt that my police officers' desire to keep people safe is far greater than the dissident Republicans' desire to do us harm. However, the fact remains that this threat places a substantial financial and human burden on delivery of policing in Northern Ireland. PSNI also bears further additional costs from policing a society in transition. These include the daily requirements of responding to interface tensions and the significant cost of preventing and responding to serious public disorder. In addition, the legacy of the past places a financial burden on the PSNI, and it costs us significantly more in terms of community confidence in policing. Indeed, this is borne out by the fact that, as we've just seen actually on a monthly basis at this board, more often than not, The majority of the questions that we answer as policing board members are less focused on the civic policing issues that are contained within the policing plan than they are on the issues relating to our society in transition, those issues of legacy and public disorder and terrorism and so on. For many people in our society, space, symbols and history remain contested. There is a lack of consensus. Board members will be well aware when police are called to serve in a contested space, it can be very costly, both in financial terms and in terms of community confidence in policing. As Chief Constable, it is important to acknowledge this challenging operational context at the outside of the performance year, at the outside of the plan for this performance year. Not, I must stress, as an early excuse for underperformance, you would let me away with that anyway, but as the simple reality of the world in which my officers and staff deliver policing on a 24/7 basis. In conclusion, Chair, I would like to say something about policing with the community. To acknowledge the importance of policing with the community, this annual update of the policing plan has been revised to reflect a strengthened emphasis on quality of service, partnership working, and a focus on our policing priorities. I welcome this. Policing with the community is about creating real participation between the police and the community. A partnership in which policing reflects and responds to the community needs and in which the community play an active part in delivering a solution. We are committed to achieving all of this and all that is laid out in this challenging policing plan. But we will not achieve success alone. You as a board, perhaps more importantly the PCSPs and the community, have an important role to play. Only by working together can we achieve the targets set out in this plan and our shared ambition to build a safe, confident and peaceful society. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chief Constable. I would now like to invite the Justice Minister to address the meeting and comment on the plan.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's never a good thing to speak third on an occasion like this. It ensures that my comments will be even briefer as I try not to repeat everything. But it's good to be here as Justice Minister to endorse this plan. Because I'm committed as Minister to ensuring that everyone in Northern Ireland receives the best possible policing service, because I believe that is the entitlement of everyone in this community. I know that goal is shared by the board and by the PSNI, and the board, as has already been said, has a key role to play in scrutinising the work of the police, in holding Chief Constable and his team to account for that. And I want to make clear that I respect the role of the board, I respect the tripartite relationship which exists, and I will ensure the department plays its part in that. They also value the role that the policing board plays in ensuring public support for policing, engaging with the public on matters of policing, particularly in the kind of work which is done locally through PCSPs. It's important that all of us in the tripartite relationship are moving in the same direction for the good of the community we serve, and it's important that that is recognised by the people of Northern Ireland. I know that a good deal of effort has gone this year into formulating appropriate performance targets, as already been alluded to by the Chief Constable, and that's been reflected in the endorsement by the Controller and Auditor General of what is now last year's plan, which I commend all of those who've been involved in it. I've had the chance to look at the plan for the year which is now 2 days old, 2015-16. It has certainly appears to me to build on a lot of good work done in the preceding year, with most of the 49 specific measures having tangible targets associated. And I believe that is important to ensure that we maintain that public confidence. From my perspective, it's also important that the plan addresses various commitments which exist within the programme for government. In that respect, reducing the level of serious crime, improving community safety by tackling antisocial behaviour, tackling crime against older and vulnerable people, domestic and sexual violence, road safety, and drug and alcohol-related offending all feature prominently. I particularly welcome the focus being developed on dealing with hate crime and the protection and support of vulnerable groups generally. I'm also content that the plan reflects my own long-term policing objectives, with human rights, policing with the community, policing in partnership, adapting to changes in society, and freedom and accountability all enshrined within it in one form or another. And I'm happy, therefore, to endorse the overall direction of the plan. I'm also acutely aware, as has just been said, that all this planning is taking place in the context of unprecedented financial austerity. I realise too that the assumption by the board of an oversight role in relation to the NCA, as you just said, Chair, and in line with the Stormont House Agreement, the soon-to-be established Historical Investigations Unit, all come at a time when we all face continuing resource pressures and that will place the board under even greater scrutiny. Over recent months, there has been much discussion, both public and private, about the financial situation we're in. Of course, we can always use more money across the justice system. While I will continue to argue the case at the executive table, I'm confident that the Chief Constable and his team will use the resources available efficiently to help make Northern Ireland a safer place. For my part, as Minister, I will continue in my role to do what I can to protect the frontline justice system, most particularly in this context of policing. Can I thank you all, whether board members, police, or our other stakeholders, for the work that you also play in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your comments and for your support to the board. Much appreciated. I'd like to say thank you to the Partnership Committee who had responsibility for leading on the development of this year's plan, and indeed to all of the people who have worked on the plan. And therefore, as we move to board questions, I'm going to ask Dolores Kelly, who's Chair of the Partnership Committee, to lead off with the first question.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Constable did refer to the paramilitary so-called punishment beatings and shootings in recent weeks and months, and how the community and the PCSP have a critical role in that. You might want to say more around that. However, Chair, I would also like to raise the issue of road safety, which is also a major concern in the community, and there have been a number of fatalities in recent weeks as well. And notwithstanding the fact it's not all down to policing, but how can you ensure that any of those interim targets in relation to road safety can be met for the overall strategy of 2020?
Well, thank you for that. I'll ask Stephen to comment on maybe some more of the detail around what we're just doing currently around the paramilitary assaults or the influence of the plan to bring about. This is a bigger issue. The police have a key role to play in terms of bringing people to justice, but there is something badly wrong with our society when there is an acceptance or an ambivalence to the fact that this happens. And then after Stephen's dealt with that, I'll invite Alan, who leads some of the policing issues, to address some of where we have been and where we're hoping to go around performance on road policing. Stephen, with you.
In his opening remarks, Dolores, the Chief Constable, mentioned that since the last time we met as a group, there have been 5 shootings and 7 assaults in these so-called paramilitary shootings and assaults. You know, at the outset we have to condemn them. They're absolutely wrong. There's no place for them. They're barbaric. A number of these people have life-changing injuries inflicted by people acting often on rumour, on gossip, with no due process, no respect for human rights, no criminal justice process at all. If people have concerns about anything in the community, they should be coming to us. We treat this extremely seriously, as do the board. You have a target in your policing plan for a 2% reduction for next year. I want to assure the board that every one of these is as thoroughly investigated as is possible. We treat them as serious crimes. We treat them as attempted murders. The whole remit of investigative approach is brought to them. The difficulty we do have at times, frequently unfortunately, is that victims, through fear and intimidation, won't cooperate with us. And the way our criminal justice process is structured, without the cooperation of the victim, people want to come forward and give a statement, potentially give evidence, it makes the prosecution very, very difficult indeed. But we are thoroughly investigating them. We also, in recent weeks, have relaunched, with the help of the Belfast PCSPs, I have to say, the Not the Face of Justice campaign. We're engaged in a whole range of partnership work, and I think at this stage it would be also important to acknowledge that we have a very successful model of communities and police working together to try and tackle this very issue, amongst other things. Community Restorative Justice Ireland and Alternatives continue to work closely with us, particularly in Belfast, and we see this as an opportunity to try and re-engage on this issue, to learn from the 15 years of work that we've had with those groups. And these conversations are already well underway in Belfast between the police and the restorative justice community. But the Chief has already alluded to it. Unfortunately, there is at times an ambivalence, a tolerance within communities for this type of activity. It's completely unacceptable, but what it does show is that a policing response will never, on its own, in isolation, will never be enough. We've talked about the partnership work, but this is as much a societal and cultural problem, a legacy issue from our 40 years of troubles, and evidence that we're still a community in transition, and there's much work collectively we have to do around this. Some talk has been made of our outcome rates, and it is difficult. I want to reassure the board that we have had success against a range of people who we would suspect are involved in this type of activity, and we have maybe caught them and brought them before the court and successfully had them prosecuted for a range of other offences. So whether that would be other grievous bodily harm offences or firearms offences or explosive offences. We focused on trying to solve these particular crimes, but often we do have success against people who are involved in these for other offences.
Thank you. Debbie?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I would like to ask a question around young people and policing. And as a board, we're keenly aware that 70% of frontline police time is spent on young people. And I don't mean just young people as offenders, but oftentimes young people, especially young men between the ages of 16 and 25, are more likely to be victims of crime. So with that statistic of 70% of frontline police time, I just want to ask for some feedback on how the police intend to build their levels of confidence amongst young people, and talk a little bit about the appropriate levels of training and support that police officers will receive to help them engage appropriately around young people. Thank you.
Okay, I'll pass that to Chris. He leads on that and service improvement.
Well, thank you. It's maybe helpful actually just to step through the plan to cover a few of those points, because it's plug and obviously it's our plan, so it's good to highlight it. Probably one of the groups that are touched on most for this plan are young people. So for example, in terms of page 8, the board has a responsibility, which obviously we will support, around trying to establish a baseline and understanding of what levels of confidence young people have, because we don't know what the problem is or what they think of policing. Well, then it's going to be hard to address it. And then obviously have training to try and deal with some of those issues. So that there's a key part in the plan, I think, at the start about actually understanding how respect and fairness shown by police will have an impact on young people's confidence. And I think we'll see that probably quite clearly whenever we establish a baseline, some of the concerns that young people have with interactions with police. Page 12 talks and picks up your point about vulnerability, that young people are disproportionately represented as victims and on occasions as offenders as well. And there's something there about police officers building a degree of trust so that young people will actually report the crime that happens to them in the first place. And as and when young people are offenders, because let's be very clear, at times young people do commit crime, that they're treated fairly and proportionately, and that doesn't always mean going through the full spectrum of the criminal justice process. There are different ways to get the message home and to have consequences for young people and giving them a lifetime criminal record, and that's something we take very seriously. The bottom of page 12 talks about cyberbullying, which isn't just something that happens to young people, but probably something that's different to many of people at this table whenever they were growing up. Not myself, of course, because I grew up with computers, but I think young people nowadays have computers in their hands. They live their life socially, online, and indeed not only is that a huge opportunity, but it's a huge challenge for them as well in terms of the bullying and the offensive behaviour and words and activities that can be recorded on video or in words. And there's a different domain and a different environment in which young people live. Policing has a key role along with education in trying to protect them and keep them safe, and that's an area of real interest for young people. So there's an opportunity there for us to engage with them, and also training for police officers and actually understanding everything from Instagram to Facebook to Twitter. So there's an issue there for us around our training whenever we're dealing with young people. Alan, who escaped, I'm sure would have talked about the radar centre and road safe as opportunities for us, for young people, again, to keep them safe on the roads, because page 15 of the plan talks about the target in terms of trying to keep young people safe in terms of our roads, either passengers, cars or pedestrians. So again, there's a real opportunity for police to build confidence with schools in a partnership about keeping young people safe. The final bit I'll say, and sort of my plug for the plan ends, is page 18 outlines our critical projects for change. What are we going to do differently and how are we going to do things differently? And Policing with the Community is our signature project within our change programme in terms of building a culture. There's 3 words that are key to that culture, and I think they're things that have to hallmark our approach to dealing with young people. The first one talks about fairness, and I've touched on that already, that young people know we treat them fairly and with respect. The second word talks about collaboratively, that we actually make decisions with young people, we give them a voice and we involve them. And the final bit is about accountability. It's maybe not something that young people actually would see themselves as being able to hold over the police, but actually accountability for policing from young people is probably almost more critical than any other group, and we are servants of young people as much as we are any other sort of sector in society. So that's what the plan covers. I think it's at least 4 blocks of the plan talk very specifically about young people, so it's important to you, it's important to us, and ultimately this will hold us to account over whether or not we take young people seriously, give them a voice, and keep them safe from harm.
We did say you were the newest member of the team. We didn't say anything about you being the youngest. Before you get too confident. Dolores has reminded me that she didn't get an answer to the road safety part of the question, so I don't know who's going to. Alan, give Alan his chance now.
When the chief said it escaped, I thought he might have spoken too soon. Dolores, I'd like to give you some reassurance that across the 3 E's, as we talk about enforcement, education and engineering, that we will continue to work with the partners across this, notwithstanding that each and every partner is under similar pressure to ourselves in terms of use of resources and how we do that. Having said that, that in itself provides some opportunities to do away perhaps with duplication and to streamline those partnerships in terms of shared outcomes. I've written to the board recently outlining how we continue to keep our promises around our less tolerance around the key causative factors of accidents, how we're using less discretion and how we're ramping up that enforcement. And it is good news so far, and these things are always subject to the swings, as you know. But in the first 3 months of this calendar year, we are actually lower than last year, and indeed lower than the preceding year, which was in itself one of the lowest years ever. So for the first 3 months of this year, it has been one of our best starts to the calendar year in terms of road fatalities. But we know how fickle these numbers can be, and how a very bad weekend on our roads can not only result in unmeasurable pain for families, but also completely turn around how we see this. So we are not at this stage, despite the fact that we're one of our best ever first quarters for some time, proposing at this stage to change anything about making our approach less robust. I think that would be premature. I don't think that we'll get thanked for it. It remains, as I reported in December, the fact that we caught over 3,000 people driving on the roads last year, a stain in our communities, and a job that we really have to push through in terms of what's acceptable. Stephen touched about the ambivalence to certain things in our society. I add to that some of the behaviour on the roads, which regularly leads to tragedy and family pain across the province. And we will be looking to take that forward. Chris helpfully mentions radar and road safe, again under pressure for good finance, and yet, despite all those challenges, this senior team has found the money to make sure that radar opens this year and continues that work, and we continue to drive that forward.
Thank you. The next question from Bryce, then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Constable, given that there were some failures last year to meet the targets that were in the 14-15 plan, and there were more targets this year in the 15-16 plan, what is there about this year's plan that makes you confident that more targets will be met?
Well, I think we have a focus within the organisation around performance. I can assure the board that whilst we treat each other with respect and with courtesy, there is also some very frank discussions that go on right from within and at the level of the senior team, through the district commanders that are joining us here, and right through to where it really matters at ground level, the people delivering the service. And those sessions are not about blame, but they're about accountability and they're about improving service delivery. So what we have done since Drew has been appointed as Deputy Chief Constable, he can talk about this because he's created it, himself and Chris Noble have developed a performance management framework, which is different to what we've done before. It will give us information faster, more meaningful, and allow us to intervene with that information to drive performance. So I think we have got the infrastructure in place to get a better grip around performance. I think it's a leadership challenge, frankly, and I have made it clear what my expectations are. Those of you in the partnership committee will not receive a huge amount of resistance to targets, for example. We're going to get that, be the accountability body. I think that's a good thing to do. And we have tried to influence those from a professional policing perspective to make sure that they're meaningful and that they're are around the right issues. There is always a big caveat, and I mentioned this in my opening comments. We work, Drew in a moment will talk you through some of the performance management framework, but before we get to that, we operate in a hugely volatile environment. Sometimes a lack of political consensus manifests itself in a vacuum that gets therefore played out in the streets in terms of heightened tension and sometimes public disorder. I don't know what this year's marching season is going to look like, the parading season. Depends who you talk to. We'll be doing everything that we can to influence people for good, for peaceful outcome, making sure that any protest activity is lawful and peaceful. I'm hoping that we'll see the same political leadership that we saw last year when, in my view, there was mature leadership from within the Orange Order and other institutions within political parties that actually realised that taking frustrations and tensions into disorder in the streets, there were no winners in that. But because we do have such a volatile, dynamic operating environment, if we are standing behind shields, we're not dealing with rural crime. If we're standing at interfaces dealing with disorder and keeping sides apart, we're not, it's the same people who get mobilised out of the e-crime unit who should be tackling cybercrime to stand in public order suits. So we will do our level best, but my earlier comments were fair. There's a lot of police demand which is difficult to predict, it's highly volatile, around disorder, around terrorism investigations, even around legacy, all of which impact on our ability to deal with the present day civic policing stuff that's contained in this plan. So I'm not getting my excuses in early or anything like that. We've signed up to this plan, we're committed to it, we want to be held to account, we want to deliver against it, that's unequivocal. But I also need an understanding from the board and from the community that we can't do everything. And a lot of this depends on good order and sense prevailing over the summer in relation to the whole issue around parades, protest activity and so on. So that's my way of background, but that's the specifics of your question, Drew, and we have some comments around what the performance regime looks like.
Before we does that, sorry to intervene once more, but could you say whether there will be particular work done on business crime, which I don't think features specifically in the policing plan, but could you say a few words about the kind of work that will be done in that area? You are a colleague.
Well, business crime is an important area. The plan in the introductory comments, which is the board's plan, of course, that has been developed in collaboration with us, but your plan does not include a reference to business crime. It is a subject close to my own heart, especially if you look at the overall well-being of society and the economic turnaround that is hopefully coming for us. It is important that that isn't undermined by vulnerable businesses being exploited by organised criminals or paramilitary groups, frankly. So this is important. Just because it isn't mentioned in the plan doesn't mean we'll not be getting it attention. As a former director of the Scottish Business Crime Centre, I absolutely understand the strategic importance of allowing business to flourish for the well-being of society. We get that, But there is actually something about everything is a priority, nothing's a priority. We have expertise around organised crime, around financial crime, around dealing with intimidation and blackmail and all of that, which is sitting ready to go and support businesses that are vulnerable to any sort of crime, whether it's paramilitary crime, organised crime, or whatever. And again, the partnership element of that is important. So it's not something that we will ignore, but it's not in your plan. But through our tasking processes, as we see issues emerging, we will respond to them. So it doesn't mean that everything else goes undone or not given any attention, just because it's not in the plan. I mean, we've had the same issue in previous years in the board's plan around young people, for example, not getting specific mention. Because this time around, because we're come the journey that we've been on, and I think business crime is one of those issues that we can't afford to ignore, but it is an accurate observation to say that it's not in the plan, but not everything makes it to the plan. It doesn't mean it doesn't get attention. Do you want to add anything around the sort of performance issue, which are the issue numbers?
Thank you. Even just further, just the comments around business crime. The DOJ recently formed the Business Crime Working Group. PSNI is part of that, and then we work with the various associations, trade associations, etc., which represent small businesses, retailers, etc., within Northern Ireland. So that's very much about crime prevention, keeping communication open, and indeed some of the business representative groups are also represented on the strategic group of the Organised Crime Task Force. So again, there's representation here, and we are very mindful as well, and it is reflected in the plan around cybercrime, the growth of that threat, and particularly the focus on business as well. So overall, it's not in the plan, but it's not that we're ignoring it as a crime type or as a group of victims either. Bryce, if I can just give you further assurance about that. It is a plan that we've worked on together. We very much identify with all that is in the plan. Indeed, we introduced a lot that's in the plan in the discussions as well. And so we see it as a collaborative effort, but we respect very much that this is the Policing Board's request of us in terms of our performance in the coming year. And in particular there, we are we're very concerned and anxious to deliver around vulnerability and specific targets in place in respect of vulnerability and indeed road safety and the quarterly reporting that the board wants in respect of detections which are closely related to serious and indeed fatal road traffic collisions. To put this in a word, this is about focus. Some of the structural changes that have already been outlined today do assist in that. Stephen's outlined it at length, new structures sitting at district level and in area command, and that is all about hour by hour, day by day, grip of what's going on, demand not only in terms of incidents being reported, but also information coming in that we, the police service, can respond to. And also, it's clearly shown that with volume crime, the best chance of clearing that crime is on the day. If you leave it a week, your chances are far, far diminished. So it's about dealing with today's crime and today's incidents today, and a lot of the focus then on the areas and the task and structure will be in respect of that. Similarly then, the changes within crime with all of the detective resources sitting will again brings focus and allows the surge of resources around where specific problems may be arising. So last summer, unfortunately, we had a series of very terrible, serious sexual assaults, which were huge drain on resources. Now we'll be able to surge our resources across the detective family to meet that sort of spike-type demand. Overall then, we've worked hard around getting our performance on the one page in effect, so at a glance we can see where we are on any day. Then that's at an organisational level, and that can be layered down into areas and districts how people are performing. And the purpose of that is to see who's working well, who's doing well, Why is that happening? Share the good practice. People are falling behind, at least pointing out to where their neighbour, where the comparator is doing well, but also to take a longer term look at this, not comparing this month with last month, but at that, working on this in terms of trends. What are our trends? Are the trends going the right way, or are they going the wrong way? What can we do to mitigate those threats? So it's very much about daily analysis, daily focus, daily intervention, and on my part and the part of other senior officers, and that is about driving that business as well. It will be done in conjunction with various heads of branches and the district commanders as well. And also then within this we'll have specific examination of areas. So for instance, we've looked at sickness absence. There's a very demanding target of a 25% reduction in sick absence of police officers next year. And we've looked at the policy, but it will require radical change on our part in terms of our culture and our policy to deliver that type of change. And we will report to the board on our progress in respect of that as we go forward. Overall then, there is a performance hub in the centre. It's a very small group of people. It is supported then by the various people who look after performance in districts and in the departments. It's not a growth area. We've tried to constrain the number of people involved in this, but we have changed the way we communicate, and so that information is far more readily available. Management information that is accessible and changes indeed day by day, and actually informs us on a day-to-day basis.
We're fast running out of time, but we have two more questions. Could I ask people asking them to be brief, and if we could have sort of brief answers as well, please. Brian Roundtree has a question on training.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Constable, as you said in your opening remarks, this plan does set a high bar for policing, but I would also say that the plan is based on a realistic level of community expectation for effective policing. Given that, could you outline what additional training and developments will PSNI undertake in terms of officers and staff in helping them achieve and deliver on the targets as set out in the plan? Because having an expectation is one thing, we need it to be realised and measured within the plan.
Fair challenge, Brian. I think Mark's probably the best place to answer that.
I suppose the first thing to say is that the Chief and the DEP have outlined very clearly how they intend to drive performance, and so most of the changes in behaviour and and change targets is going to be driven through performance, not necessarily through retraining people. Brian, I think we need to be sort of honest about that, and that's where most of the cultural change will come through leadership as opposed to training. That said, our training business plan is due with the board in the next week or so, and due to come to present it to the resources committee. 90% of our training is mandatory, stuff that we have to do to meet legal requirements, so there's a very small window for additional training. The bids for additional training are colossal at the minute. Everybody in the change programs is asking for a bit of training for their people. I have asked David Beatty, who's writing this up on behalf of the training of the college, to make sure that the plan is coterminous with the policing plan. What we're trying to do is deliver against what's in the plan. So therefore the focus for the 10% will be around vulnerability. There's additional work to be done around leadership training for newly promoted middle and senior ranks, and specific areas of work around engagement. That's going to fill up very fast because there just isn't additional money available to do any more than that. So we are going to be looking at the organisation to also lead itself through some of this, and not just rely upon being trained to effect the change that the board is requiring from us and to effect the performance. But if we wait to train everybody, then I think I'll have an excuse to perform.
I wouldn't expect everyone to be waiting to be trained, but what it is, training as a mechanism of support for those who find it difficult to achieve, that we get those interventions in as soon as possible. Because what we don't want is a sporadic nature of achievement across the districts.
Yeah, we agree with that. So an example that we talked about earlier, that Stephen is leading on, is around we want to move away from this sort of false division between response policing and neighbourhood policing. So yes, we will have a smaller number of neighbourhood policing teams in more challenging neighbourhoods, to be frank, areas of high social deprivation and so on. But actually we want the ethos to be for all people delivering the service, one of localised policing with a policeman community ethos. So We have done all sorts of things to try to communicate this, cascading it down to district commanders, many of whom are in the room today. But Stephen also has a bid to Mark, for example, for a short training program for people that are going to be involved in that, because you know, there's only so much you can communicate by email and a brochure. So we need to get people probably to change that mindset for local policing teams. We probably do need to find some mechanism of getting them into a training environment and some sort of experiential learning whereby they're challenged around how they view going to a call. You know, there's no point in people just seeing policing with the community as going to a long list of calls one after the other. We want them to turn up, see every call for service as an opportunity to engage, to build confidence in policing, to investigate, to reassure people, to make them, to leave them feeling better than they felt before the police arrived. It's a mindset piece, so there will be a bid from Stephen to Mark for that, and that's clearly one of the priorities for us organisationally. So, but one that Mark makes well is that some of this is also about leadership and just telling people this is what we need and this is what the expectation is, and you'll be clear about that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, Brian Ray.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Constable, given that we're just 2 days into the reorganisation of local government with 11 district councils, and also given that we have a map today of how you and your colleagues have reorganised your policing districts to be coterminous with those, can you indicate to us what you intend to do to ensure that communities living in the rural areas, villages and farms, who were previously served by perhaps what they would perceive to be local policing teams and police officers, how are you going to ensure that those people are adequately policed to maintain a high level of confidence in policing, bearing in mind that confidence in policing continues to be a very important matter? And secondly, just onto that, what use do you have or have you any planned additional use for mobile police stations? I recall the one down in the former F district. And also, some time ago, there was quite a bit of discussion around having police posts or community contact points. I remember in not far from where I live in C district, there was an office in a village, like a village hall area, and a constable was there at certain times in the week to take in queries. Can you give us some update on that? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take that one, Brian. Start off, I suppose, with some good news. Last year, in 2014 compared to 2013, agricultural crime reduced by just over 15% in Northern Ireland. So that's less burglary, less robbery, and less theft of farms or farmers. But whilst that's good news, we're not in any way complacent. We recognise there's much yet to do. We also recognise that there is a real confidence issue within rural communities, and the boards recognise that themselves when they've given us a target around rural crime and the plan that we've just launched. Upstairs in the private sessions, I've briefed you extensively around our plans for neighbourhood policing teams and local policing teams. Well, of course, some of the neighbourhood policing teams, the Chief has talked about that we have allocated those on the basis of high crime areas, social deprivation, but a number of those have actually been allocated around sparsity issues and isolation issues, where we've recognised that rural communities need the confidence and reassurance of a local neighbourhood policing team. But then I spoke about local policing teams, which is the critical mass of all our uniformed officers, and the new development there is that they're going to be given geographic ownership. So there will be officers who have geographical connection and ownership of all territory in Northern Ireland. And that means all territory, so that includes all the rural areas. So I think that's a big development from our restructuring. We also have a rural crime service lead, who's in fact he's in the room here, Superintendent Brian Key, who does take a particular interest in rural crime and leads a lot of our development work and a lot of our thinking and a lot of our operational tasking, and we're committed to retaining that post, and Brian will continue with that. Some of the other things I can talk about is structured patrolling. I spoke about the introduction of our coordination and tasking centres led by the area coordinators. This will mean that we will be much more acute at seeing any crime series, any spates of activity in the rural community, and we'll be able to quickly move to structured patrolling and react to that on a very quick and agile basis. We have obviously our locate technology, which allows us to say where every officer in every vehicle is at any point in time, and we can use that sort of technology very favourably in addressing the issues raised in your question, Brian. You talked about mobile police stations. I've spoken to the area coordinators about those. We have a number of mobile police stations. I think we've underused them in the past. I think now is an opportunity to reinvigorate that, and I think they're very useful, especially as our estate has fallen, our numbers of police stations over recent years. I think our mobile police stations should be used more. The community surgery, the community contact points you've talked about, I think that's a bit of development work, and I will take that away and I'll talk about that to the area coordinator, so I thank you for that. And then I suppose finally I should talk about what we're doing in partnership with others. We are full members of the Rural Crime Partnership, which the Department of Justice chair, along with ourselves and NFU Mutual and DARD. We have our good partnerships with the likes of the Ulster Farmers Union, and regularly, in fact, ACC College recently attended their conference and have been engaged in a range of work with them historically. And then, of course, we have some initiatives. So, for example, Farm Watch is the umbrella term, but we have crime prevention with rural text alert schemes. We have trailer marking, and indeed funded by the Rural Crime Partnership, there's several £1 million of tracker systems now in agricultural and rural machinery and vehicles. So we're doing a lot, we're committed to doing a lot more, and it's one of your targets in the board, so we'll take it away, and you can, hopefully that's offered you some reassurance.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Chief Constable. It's good, I think, to get that information out there in the public arena, and I'm sure there's an awful lot more going on when we actually realise. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you all very, very much indeed. Just to say that while we've published this policing plan today for 1 year, work has already started on the 3-year plan, and we will be doing a full equality impact assessment and indeed a much wider consultation, because it will be a plan for 3 years. So while this work is finished in terms of getting the plan, there's a lot of work going on for the new 3-year plan. I want to thank everyone for coming along and for asking questions. It's something we could go on and on for a long time about, but we have to stop. And just to remind people that the next public meeting is actually on the 30th of April, 4 weeks from today. Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you.
You just had a more to say.